All right. Welcome, welcome. This is the Greater Israel panel. And first and foremost, I want to introduce our panelists. First up, we have Max Blumenthal. He's the the founder of the Gray Zone. We have the lovely Katie Halper. She's the host of the Katie Halper Show and co-host of Useful Idiots. And last but not least, we have Jeremy Loffredo, who is a journalist with the Gray Zone.
And Sabby Sabs.
Thank all of you for coming. So for the past 2 years, the world has watched a live-streamed genocide. Corporate media continues to say this all started on October 7th. This erases the displacement of Palestinians, of course, prior to October 7th. We're going to start with Max. Max, what would you say is the best way to debunk this narrative that it all started on October 7th?
Well, there's a thing called history that Zionists seem to be allergic to these days. And it's very easy to debunk it if we go back to the second Aliyah of Palestine, which is when the ideological settlers arrived in 1897. Just read any account, including mainstream Zionist accounts from that point on, and read the memoirs of David Ben-Gurion. Read the memoirs of Chaim Weizmann. Read the letters of Arthur Ruppin, who helped found Tel Aviv, and you will see. Read An Iron Wall by Zev Jabotinsky, where he acknowledges that the presence of the Zionist settlers will not be welcome in Palestine, as settlers were unwelcome by the Zulu of South Africa, by the Native American Indians of the Americas, that they will have to form an iron wall of bayonets in order to repel the native resistance. That's what we're saying. We're just from coming at it from a totally different angle. That's why they're committing genocide in Gaza, because the resistance continues where it has been quelled elsewhere or defeated in South Africa, or the settlers have been essentially defeated in South Africa. So Benjamin Netanyahu recently visited a settlement called Ofra, which is strategically located east of the Ramallah Bireh district in the West Bank, and cuts off Ramallah which is supposed to be the administrative capital of a Palestinian state, from the rest of the West Bank. And it is on the road from Ramallah to Nablus, so it cuts Ramallah off from Nablus. And Israel has announced plans to construct settlements in E1, which is the last piece of land, I've been there many times, that connects East Jerusalem, which is supposed to be the political capital of a Palestinian state, from the rest of the West Bank. And Netanyahu openly declared, "I am here to show you that I will prevent a Palestinian state." I think he may have visited the same settlement back in 2001, I could be wrong, when his famous comments were leaked about America being a thing you can move easily. A week before, Benjamin Netanyahu announced that he feels a deep spiritual connection to Greater Israel. He feels a deep spiritual connection to something, but Benjamin Netanyahu has no spiritual connection to anything because he is secular. He is essentially an atheist. But he's just making this appeal to the settlers because they're the linchpin of his coalition. There's no future for him, and really there's no future for the self-proclaimed Jewish state without them. This is something that's always been acknowledged by Israeli leadership. The Labor Party as well. Ehud Barak also said in the 1990s, when he built far more settlements than any other prime minister in Israeli history, including Netanyahu, he said, "I feel a deep spiritual connection to the settlers. 1967, Shimon Peres was sent to Sebastia, where the settlers had taken over this small little outpost, and he was supposed to remove them. He went with the poet of labor Zionism, Natan Alterman, and they were there to convince them to leave. And then they said that when they got there, they were so moved by what they saw that they let them stay. So this is the future. The future of Israel is greater Israel. And if we go back to what is greater Israel? Where does it start and where does it end? Well, if we go back to the original map of what was supposed to be Israel, and I think this was the Jewish National Fund map from 1913, it's between the Nile and the Euphrates. And the Israeli flag, if they really wanted to represent Judaism, would have been a menorah, but they took this other symbol and put it between two lines, one to make it look like tefillin, a talit, which is what, the prayer cloth that we wear, but also, what are the lines? It's the Euphrates and the Nile with this Jewish symbol between it. So greater Israel they have conquered the Sinai and they were pushed back. They are conquering the Golan all the way up to the suburbs of Damascus right now. There are what are considered holy sites in Jordan. When Anya and I were in Iran, we visited the tomb, the supposed tomb of Sarah bat Asher, the granddaughter of Jacob. They could push that far and claim that this is biblical territory. The Bible is their claim. So greater Israel can extend as far as they can push it with military force, and it's extending into our own society, which is something we'll be talking about. Why was UCLA just defunded? Its Advanced Mathematics Center just lost $500 million because some students made Zionist billionaires angry, made some of Netanyahu's cutouts angry, and they told Trump to cut the funding. So greater Israel is here. And that's why I think this title is really appropriate for this panel, and it puts the history of greater Israel puts the lie to the notion that October 7th came out of this vacuum of anti-Semitism and Jew hatred, and that the genocide that is taking place is a direct and exclusive response to the Al-Aqsa flood attack. October 7th was a volcano of rage erupting against the most direct victims of greater Israel.
Speaking of military force, we have seen Israel also brutalize journalists. They have killed a number of journalists in Gaza. And Jeremy Loffredo has direct experience with dealing with the brutality of Israeli soldiers. Jeremy, could you tell everybody about what happened to you when you were arrested in Israel?
On October 2nd, Iran fired 200 ballistic missiles into Israel, Operation True Promise 2, I believe it was, and I covered where the missiles had fallen, and I went to Nevatim Air Base in the Negev Desert, and I spoke to some Bedouin communities who heard and saw and felt these missiles around them because they are near Nevatim Air Base, and that was the target. And these are Palestinians, these are Israeli citizens, but because they're not Jewish, they don't have the bomb shelters that they have in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, and they had to hide under bridges, under an overpass, children and women, because they're not Jewish and because they're Muslim and they live in the desert, they were hiding in storm drains from these missiles. And I was driving down, I was speaking to them. I noticed that I could not, if I wanted to document any actual damage of Israeli military infrastructure, I would have to be inside would have to go in this airbase. It's a 0% chance. So I don't go in the airbase. I just talk to the people who heard it, who saw them, document what happened with them, and then I went back up north towards Tel Aviv, and I found a crater about 1,000 feet from the Mossad headquarters, and I just documented. I just pointed my camera around, showed how close it was to the Mossad headquarters, showed the destruction, also kind of pushed back on the lie that there were no missile impact sites in metropolitan areas. The Iron Dome worked, perfectly, et cetera, et cetera. So between the impacts in the Negev Desert and then also the impact in Tel Aviv, we at the Gray Zone published a report showing these things. And a few days later, I was driving through the West Bank on my way up to the Jenin refugee camp, which was in the middle of a 10-day complete siege where they shut off the water. They weren't allowing food in or out. They weren't letting people leave their houses. And so I was on my way north to Jenin, and I got to a military checkpoint outside of Nablus, and they took my passport. They took I was with a few other journalists, and they pulled us to get out of the car. They shackled us, handcuffed us, blindfolded us, and put us in the back of a IDF Humvee, and drove us to some compound back towards Jerusalem. This is actually
The Russian compound. Was it?
not yet.
Okay.
It was like this was holding, and they. It's actually it's E1, like that's where this is. And when this military police compound headquarters was built in like 2008, settlers in the West Bank actually went there and celebrated the construction of this place, of this police headquarters, because they saw that this was the beginning of what's happening now. This is the beginning of cutting off East Jerusalem from Ramallah and the West Bank, and so they all celebrated the construction of it. But it's shrouded in secrecy. There's only like 3 photos on the internet that exist of it. We were all in holding. They let everyone else go, and then I was in a holding cell, and through the wall in this police headquarters, I'm hearing my own voice. They're watching my report. So like I'm like thinking like, okay, they're like really looking into me. They're finding things, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, after hours and hours, maybe it's 1 a.m., they tell me I can speak to a lawyer. I answer the phone. She says, "Mr. Loffredo, what did you do? They're accusing you of giving information to the enemy during wartime." And I said, "What? What are you talking about?" She speaks broken English too, so this is a really poor way to communicate. She says, "Is the officer in the room with you?" I said, "No." She said, "This is what's going to happen. They're going to bring you to prison now, and I'll see you tomorrow in court, probably." And at this point, one of the intelligence officers has his hand on the phone, as if to say, like, if you don't stop this conversation, I'm going to hang up. So that was what I was afforded in terms of legal assistance before I was even, I wasn't charged with anything yet. They just suspect something of me, and I'm not even allowed to really talk to a lawyer without being overseen by some intelligence agent. They reshackle me, they rehandcuff me, they put me in an unmarked cop car, leave the West Bank, go to the Russian compound in Jerusalem, which is a pretty infamous prison for security detainees, almost entirely Palestinian, of course. And I was, they gave me these little, like, feminine pink rubber sandals. They took my boots, and they threw me in this little cell with no windows, concrete. It was, it was solitary confinement. That's exactly what it was. And every maybe 30 minutes, you have Israeli guards peeking through, laughing at me, maybe even just to see, like, why is there a white American in here? This is so strange. And And then the next 4 days, I was in and out of court maybe once a day, then brought back to my solitary confinement cell. And they were charging me with giving information to the enemy during wartime, which carries a penalty of 25 years to the death penalty. So like I'm thinking, even if they go really light on me, 10 years in prison is like, that's insane. And I didn't do anything. I did nothing wrong. I am an American journalist, and my own government isn't helping me at all. The US Embassy sent one person to one of my court hearings and said, listen, I'm not here to help you, I'm just here to observe. So they're doing literally nothing for me. During the State Department briefings, while all of this was happening, they said absolutely nothing about an American journalist being detained. My father was calling the embassy saying, are you going to do anything for my son? He's in prison, he's a journalist. They didn't do anything. And finally, one of the nights I was in there, they take me out of my cell after subjecting me to 3 hours at least of the screams of one of the other detainees, yelling, crying, Israeli Hebrew demands like to the detainee right in the cell next to me. And as soon as it's done, plainclothes police officers come to get me and bring me out to the West Bank at like maybe 10 p.m. to interrogate me. I get there and I'm thinking like, where are we going? How long am I going to be there? Do I get to go back? Because at this point, I'd rather be in my cell. And they asked me questions, do you love Israel?
Now you will.
Yeah. They asked me if I'm familiar with the importance of a government military censorship office. And I say, I am, I'm not trying to poke or like cause problems here, but I am saying like, truly, yes, I did go to school, I had professors, but no, in America we have something called the First Amendment. And we don't have like a true formal military censor where every journalist needs to go through in order to get their stuff published on the internet. That's not something I am familiar with. And they're asking me questions, they're playing semantics with me. So you did know we have a military censor? Yeah, I knew, but I didn't know this. And like, so they're trying to catch me in a lie. And eventually the judge in one of my court hearings says, what is the information you have? Like what against him like warrants him staying in prison while we figure out if he's guilty or not? Like what is it? And they told the judge that it's secret. And this is like the prosecutor are just intelligence agents. Like that there's no, the police are arguing against me in court. And the judge thankfully was like, did not really accept that as an answer. Like we can't lock this American journalist up indefinitely while you tell me the stuff you have against him is secret. Like it's not going to fly with her, thankfully. They let me out, but they still took my passport, my computer, my phone, and they said you can leave under the condition that you come back to this compound in the West Bank for interrogations whenever we say. I didn't really have a choice. I said, of course, and they took my shackles off. It was wonderful. And over the next 10 days, I'd go to the West Bank for interrogation 3 or 4 times. I think it was 4 times. Some of the interrogations lasted 8 or 9 hours. And it's just they're asking the same questions over again. They're trying to catch me up in a lie. They want them to be this long. They'll take an hour-long lunch break, leave me in the room alone, and then come back and start again. The last day, they asked me a few questions, and finally it seemed like they're not going to get anything out of me. I'm just like, there's nothing. I'm worried when they have my phone and my laptop because I know there's nothing actually illegal in there, no terrorist material, but like, what are they going to, consider terrorist material? I have been sending, money every now and then via PayPal to people in Gaza. So like, are they going to look at that and say, this guy's a terrorist, you're sending money to terrorists? Maybe some memes or photos on my phone, they would consider that, illegal. I don't know. It's just, I know there's nothing wrong, but you don't know what they consider wrong. And then finally, they called my lawyer and they said, tell Mr. Loffredo to book a flight and then send us the information. And I booked a flight, the fastest I've ever booked a flight. I booked a flight, and they just went incommunicado. They never answered, even till now. They have never answered. They call it, my lawyer calls it kind of an informal deportation. They don't want to face the political repercussions of actually deporting an American journalist. So they just like quietly tell the lawyer to tell him to leave the country. You know, if he knows what's best, he'll leave. And they're leaving my case open as a way to dissuade me from returning. So like if I go to Ben Gurion right now, I have an open, aiding the enemy during wartime case investigation into me, and I would be, detained immediately. And that's essentially, in short, how I was treated by the Israeli military and the Israeli state as an American journalist. I was paying for, I was paying for my shackles. I was paying for the blindfold. They were making fun of me endlessly, dragging me around like a dog around the prison, I was not on all fours, but I was like dragged by my shackles or by my handcuffs, pulled. I had to keep up with, I can't walk any stairs, I can't walk quickly. It was really, really dehumanizing and an experience where I learned a lot about how they think of Americans who don't support Israel.
And what happened to Jeremy is just one example, right? Like we've seen a number of videos that I think that have woken a lot of people up if they were not aware of what Gaza was or what the West Bank was. They definitely are aware today. And that brings me to the United States. The pro-Palestinian protests. This is something that happened right after October 7th. A lot of people rose up. I think that first big protest in DC had over 500,000 people. There were many of you who were in this room that were present at that protest. Those protests still continue today. Recent reports show that support for Israel has declined in the United States. I think it's at a historic low. Last time I checked that data. So we want to ask Katie Halper here. Katie, could you explain the significance of these protests and some of the things that you saw on the ground? And then we'll come back to Max for the police force.
So I guess the protests, of course, are a sign that anti-Semitism is alive and well. Just kidding. No, the protests are really inspiring. And just before I touch on this, I wanted to just piggyback on some points that were made by Max and Jeremy, if that's okay. But, it's interesting you mentioned the pink slippers, which made me think of the great Joe Arpaio, Sheriff Joe, who was pardoned by Trump, who would also make prisoners wear pink in an attempt to, humiliate them. But so it's true when they talk about shared values. There are shared values. They're like shared values of sadism between Israel and the U.S. And in terms of your first question, Sabby, about the pushing back on the propaganda that this all started on October 7th, I co-sign, of course, everything that Max said, but a couple more points I want to make. One is that one of the favorite Hasbara talking points is, of course, that Israel pulled out of Gaza, and look what they did. This is what happens when you pull out and you let them govern themselves. And of course, that's a big lie because they didn't pull out. I mean, they did pull out troops, but they didn't stop controlling everything in Gaza, right? So they control Gaza's airspace, their water, who goes in and out, their no-go zones. You have to get permission to get life-saving medical treatment. And even, Dov Weinglass, who was Ariel Sharon's advisor at the time of the disengagement, called the disengagement formaldehyde, political formaldehyde, which served to freeze the peace process. So that's an important thing, I think, to remind people of when they regurgitate the talking point about Israel pulling out of Gaza. Of course, there's kind of a larger question of, and I struggle with this a lot too, who's convertible, who who it's worth wasting our time trying to persuade, because there's some people who we will never reach, and we can leave them to be their, miserable, delusional Zionist selves. There are probably some people who can be reached, and I think that is a question of strategy and organizing. But the other thing I would bring up is that, people who claim this is all about October 7th and all about Hamas, a relative of mine actually who blocked me on Facebook, he told me, he's like, I love you, but I'm blocking you on Facebook. And I wasn't even fighting with him because I never go on Facebook. It was mostly that I would post one of my videos from my show on Facebook. My relative would respond, and then all my other followers would respond to him and attack him, rightfully so. But he then emailed me, and he was like, I guess you were right, in parentheses, or extreme left on Israel. And the thing that changed his mind, actually, was seeing No Other Land, because No Other Land, people probably know, is the Academy Award winning documentary by an Israeli and a Palestinian director, which, of course, because it's Academy Award winning, why would you be able to see it anywhere? So it's almost impossible to find. But that shows what happens in the West Bank, and it's before October 7th. And so obviously anyone following this knows this already, but it is a useful thing, I think, for people who are not following this to just point out. So they were killing people and terrorizing people before October 7th, and they were doing this in the West Bank, where Hamas is not in power. So there are lots of, I think, useful things to bring up to people. But in terms of the protest movement, I think that it's, it is, support for Israel is at an all-time unprecedented low. I think that's encouraging. It's always hard because public opinion moves before policy moves, and that can be frustrating. But on the other hand, policy doesn't move without public opinion shifting. So I think that's something to be, excited about. Another issue, though, is that, there's this Tony Greenstein, who some of you I'm sure have read. He wrote the book Zionism During the Holocaust. And he points out that, if Zionists stop supporting Israel today, like Christian Zionists and Jewish Zionists stop supporting Israel today, nothing would change in terms of U.S. and Western support of Israel, because he actually calls Jews the moral alibi of imperialism and Zionism. So that's another, I think, question. It's exciting that there's a protest movement. I actually think there's much more potential for movement in terms of influence coming from the right than from the left, because as we all know, Republicans fear their base, Democrats have contempt for them, disdain them, whatever. And so that the question is, what can we do with this all-time historic, unprecedented low level of support? And I do think that, the crackdown is evidence, though, of its power. You don't really bother cracking down ruthlessly on things that you don't fear. Obviously, there's a lot of repression here in the States. In England, it's insane. I mean, England makes us look like the land of the free, home of the brave. I know, that's always a good punchline. I actually know, I'm working on this documentary about Jewish Holocaust survivors who are speaking out against the ongoing genocide. The ones who say never again for anyone, as opposed to never again means we have the right to kill a bunch of people who had nothing to do with killing us, and somehow that's going to make us safe. I didn't realize this, by the way, until I started working on this, and never again was also a slogan for Kahani. I didn't realize that, so it's kind of fascinating. Really shows you the split over the use of that term. But one of the people I interview is this fascinating character. His name is Haim Bershis Zabner. He actually wrote a really great book called A War Like No Other about the IDF. He's an Israeli who is still a citizen, but he doesn't live there anymore. He's in England. And he spoke at a protest in front of the Israeli ambassador's house residence in London. And he said, not even in a cheering way, but in a kind of prognostic way, that Israel wasn't going to be able to defeat Hamas, the Houthis, or Hezbollah. And this guy's 79. He's the son of survivors who weighed 70 pounds when the camps were liberated. And he was arrested for saying that under the terror law. So he was arrested for saying that. He has cancer and a heart condition. He wasn't given his medications. He wasn't allowed to speak to his wife. It was a total sham. And of course, he doesn't even like to talk about it, because to talk about this while a genocide is going on seems almost ridiculous. He's not being self-pitying at all. And of course, as he acknowledges what happened to another person who is Palestinian, they don't even know the person's name, was far worse than what happened to him. I just think it speaks to how much crackdown we're seeing now. And again, it's terrible, but it's a good sign. It's a sign of something scary, but it's also a sign that there's something good that's happening that they feel the need to respond to. Another character I interviewed, Stephen Kapush, who's 87, was at a protest, and he was brought in for questioning because he committed the crime of laying flowers down at a monument to recognize killed Palestinian children. So I'm glad the Met Police are on the hunt for terrorists. like Stephen Kaposh and Chaim Bershis-Zabner.
Wow, wow.
Oh, and really quickly, the other thing I'd say is that, I mean, I've been to a bunch of the encampments in New York City, and you see a lot of terrorists in the form of people wearing like kippas, obvious anti-Semites, raging, self-loathing Jews, you know, doing stuff like having like Shabbat and, you know, what you expect.
I remember you interviewed those kids who chained themselves
Yeah.
to the fence at Columbia or
Yeah,
Barnard.
Columbia, yeah.
And you they're like chained to the fence, and you go up and interview them, and they're all wearing kippahs, and you're like, "What do you major in?" And they're like, "I major in Jewish studies."
Yeah.
I major in Jewish studies.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man,
Yeah.
raging anti-Semitism.
I know, yeah. One of them actually is an Israeli, actually he's American, and he moved to Israel to be a settler. And then he realized then he became a conscientious objector. Now he's at Columbia. He was a good friend of Masen what's his name?
From Sia?
No, Masen, not, there was the two Columbia students. First there was
Oh, I know who you're talking-
Mahmoud Khalil, and the other one was Mosan something. I can't remember his last name. Good friend of his, the guy who was arrested in Vermont.
Yeah.
Masa Mandawi. And he's I mean, his story is incredible because he's now, of course, a major advocate for ceasefire, and he went from being a settler to someone who sees Israel as a fascist state. So, but yeah, those are the kinds of goons you have to look out for. And I brought my dog too, so you know it's safe if I brought Bucky.
I think what's interesting is some of us have heard this type of criticism that why should I concern myself with global affairs when we have issues here in the United States? But I think that when we think about what happened to Jeremy and we think about the pro-Palestinian protests, that brings me to the police state. And Max, I want you to give some insight here in reference to what's happening in DC or what happened in DC recently with the police state and where that really comes from.
Well, it comes from the crisis we've been talking about. It's a result of the drop in public opinion, and it's gonna be exposed and be forced into our faces more and more in the coming months and years, where more and more of the public would like to see a poll. I think it may have been a YouGov or a Pew poll showed a majority of Americans want Benjamin Netanyahu to be arrested when he comes here next. And they didn't poll anyone on concrete shoes or other options, but I bet those numbers would have been pretty high. Those of you from Chicago know what I'm talking about. Yeah, Brooklyn too, okay. Or what happened to Alan Dershowitz's first wife. Look that up. There is a poll showing that the percentage of Democrats or self-identified progressives under 35 who support Israel, it's almost zero. It's almost like in the margin of error, like none of them support Israel. If they were a young Democrat who really supports Israel and its current incarnation and what it's doing in Gaza, they have gone over to the Republican Party because that's their main issue. And so the crisis is brewing in the Democratic Party. There's a DNC meeting coming up where there is a resolution on the table being supported by many, many delegates to block weapons to Israel. And Ken Martin, the DNC chair, is trying to replace it with some hollow, empty Biden language about like pining for the children of Gaza while doing absolutely nothing and supporting a two-state solution. So that crisis will erupt at the DNC. Like we're going to see that. We're going to see that in congressional races. Democrats are going to get primaried. Hopefully there's a primary for Richie Torres and someone is running against him independently up in the Bronx. I think he's going to be the next he's going to be a victim of his own hubris and being willing to go out in freezing cold weather in his underwear and eat mofongo if AIPAC asks him to. He will literally do anything for AIPAC and he's going to pay the price. So, but...
Mofongo, gefilte fish mofongo.
Yeah, kosher mofongo. But For the most part, we are under occupation, a kind of occupation, and a political occupation, and we are mostly powerless to do anything about it. And more and more people are burning with rage about the final solution they're witnessing in Gaza. I meet so many normal people who are asking me what they can do. Like my normie friends who I went to college with, who have would see the gray zone as anathema, are asking me how can we get aid in? What can we do? It's become a thing. Who knows? They might even have a We Are the World fake Bob Geldof concert, but there won't be any of the talent from the 80s. It's going to be what do we have now? I don't even know what contemporary music is because I'm not a masochist, but Bad Bunny. Los niños necesitan comer. Basically, we're powerless. And so the more that we exert force to change the situation, the more we're going to see the nails, the Freddy Krueger-like nails of the state, which has been heavily infiltrated by the Zionist movement, come out. And we did see that, as Sabby alluded, on the streets of DC, where a truck displaying protected speech, a billboard, you see this all over DC. Basically, there's these guys who run these businesses where they own these billboard trucks, and they rent them out to any political campaign. It'll be Stop Resolution C4, and no one even knows what it is. But this truck said, feed the children of Gaza. Israel is starving Gaza. The driver was arrested. The driver had their computer and all devices seized. They're under investigation. They just got out of jail last night. The whole scene was sealed off, and it was part of Trump's federal occupation of DC. It wasn't just Capitol Police. It was ICE. And ICE is not enforcing, that they're not an immigration enforcement. They're basically a deputized thug squad of Proud Boys and Gestapo who are trying to normalize the concept of secret police in our society to crush dissent. This is just the first stage. This is the inception of something much bigger, and look at what they're targeting. At the same time, I was at the location of that billboard truck 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago when this amazing protest that if you're in DC you should visit. It's an encampment outside the main media offices of Fox News, News Nation, C-SPAN. It's at 400 North Capitol. Incredible group. The people who did the encampment outside Tony Blinken's home, Kibbutz Blinken, are doing this. I spoke at their opening event. And I met a young woman who told me her ailing mother was in the car, couldn't get out, and she is being sued by this organization, Beitar, this extreme kind of Likudnik, pro-settler, fascistic street organization, which is more influential than they get credit for, and they were supplying the faces of and names of students who are green card holders and visa holders to the Trump administration to grab and deport. They kind of claim credit for Mahmoud Khalil.
But don't be modest, because we're both on their list too, right? As people who can't go to Israel. They don't want us to go to Israel. Have you seen that? They put you on their list? Beitar?
Oh, yeah, they came up with a list of people who should not be allowed into Israel.
Including Adrian Rich and Tony Judd, who I'm pretty sure they'll be successful in given that they're dead.
So yeah, I probably couldn't go anyway because of the whole Jeremy situation. So I'll probably be going back on the back of a Chinese motorbike with Al-Qassam brigades if I ever go back in there.
I think the YouTube stream just got cut.
That was a joke. I'm going to make Aliyah. No, anyway, this woman told me her mother is being sued by Beitar because she was part of they're protesting at a city council event. Beitar thugs and goons show up, including one particularly notorious woman who's always carrying an Israeli flag and waving it in people's faces. I actually was slapped with her flag at the inaugural Peace Ball while I was entering. And she claimed that this woman pulled her flag and therefore committed a hate crime. And I believe it's a magistrate judge or a federal judge has ruled that this woman actually attacked a Jewish symbol by supposedly pulling this flag. And now we're seeing in a court has effectively declared that it is illegal in the United States to vandalize or burn or even pull on an Israeli flag, while it is legal and First Amendment protected speech to burn an American flag. And this perfectly encapsulates the situation we're in and the repression that is to come. So we see what's happening in the UK with Palestine Action, a group that has never committed violence, actually opposes violence, exists to oppose state violence, being proscribed as a terrorist organization, and grandmothers and grandfathers who go out to declare their support for Palestine Action are hauled off by riot police during protests outside Westminster. That is coming across the Atlantic, and Americans are not going to stand for it. If there's one thing that people hold dear in this country that does make us at least better than the European fake democracies, is the First Amendment, and Americans are just not going to stand for that. And so we will see more and increasingly the bottom drop out of Israeli support on the right as well, where all the so-called free speech warriors are being exposed as the biggest hypocrites in our country.
The flag thing that you mentioned, by the way, reminds me of Germany, which I don't think they succeeded, but they were attempting to make swearing loyalty to Israel a requirement to become a German citizen, which was interesting because they didn't make swearing loyalty to Germany a requirement.
Well, and Germany's biggest media conglomerate, which does all of the pro-Israel propaganda, they own Bild and all the tabloids, Axel Springer Group, they make their employees sign an oath of loyalty to the special relationship with Israel and the transatlantic relationship with the U.S., which is code for bomb Russia, and accept that the Nord Stream pipeline will be bombed by Ukraine or Jake Sullivan or whoever.
At least they admit that they have this special genocidal relationship, Germany and Israel.
Yes, shared values.
Yeah, exactly.
This is true. Speaking of free speech, this is a big one. I think a lot of us have been talking about this for, I don't know how long, but it seems like several years. I don't know if everyone has seen this, but Benjamin Netanyahu just recently, this past week, is asking for censorship of social media and an algorithmic change to favor Israel. So again, Israel's having a lot of control here over U.S. politics, but he made that request publicly, and he said it in English, which from what I understand means he was speaking directly to us. I want to start to Jeremy here, and then we'll go to Katie. Jeremy, as an investigative journalist, how do you feel about the censorship? Does that make you any, somewhat worrisome when you're reporting on certain issues, in particular about Israel?
I just want to talk real quick, piggyback on what's happening in D.C. Trump just said that he's going to review the visas of 55 million visas or something like that. And in the language, at the very end, it's like, we're going to check, visa status, did you overstay your visa? Did you do X, Y, or Z? Have you ever provided any vocal or any support for terrorism? And so it's like, it kind of stuck that in the end, but like, we all know what that means. That means, what are you saying about Israel? So it's, the MAGA people think that they're getting these mass deportations, but then you look at the fine print and they're really looking for critics of Israel. And I feel like that's exactly also what ICE is doing in DC, because they're supposed to be looking for, illegal immigrants, they're looking for all these things, and they're arresting the driver of a Palestinian protest vehicle. That has nothing to do with what we were told it was about. But in terms of censorship, Julian Assange has this quote where he talks about, I'm going to butcher, but he essentially says, censorship is cause for celebration because it shows that the power structure is so weak that they have to think about, they have to care about what people say and think. That like just the fragile, the thoughts or the tweets or this, that, and the other, it could affect their hold on power. So like when we see the censorship regime is so crazy right now, it does, like, of course it's unsettling, but at the same time, it just shows that they know they're losing their grip on the argument. And I mean, and even more so, this isn't in America, but like in Gaza, I mean, when you have 200 and something journalists murdered, that's a form of censorship. That's, censorship enforced by, rocket fire. So, and they know that, those journalists are, they're reporting what's going on in Gaza, and if, the West or whoever sees their reporting, they're going to be exposed and they're going to lose their grip on power. So censorship is just a cause for celebration insofar as it's proof that they really, what we're saying and what we're thinking, really, it does affect them.
Right. I think it's important for people to understand as well is that when it comes to the censorship, in particular about Israel, there are journalists and commentators that lost their jobs because they told the truth about what Israel was doing, and they weren't willing to capitulate to the corporate media narrative at that point in time. And one of them was Katie Halper. And Katie, I'd like for you to tell everybody about what happened to you at Rising.
Yeah, so I mean, I should say I was really, really, really like lucky and privileged compared to others who have lost their jobs because I had other shows that I was hosting, so it didn't like ruin my livelihood. So sorry to everyone who sent me all that money thinking it did. I'm just kidding, I didn't get any money. Hi, Putin, or Qatar. But yeah, I was actually, what's fascinating about that story, I think, is that this was at Rising, at The Hill, which, brands itself and pats itself on the back for being a show that allows you to speak outside of the normal constraints of corporate media. And of course, that's true until you talk about Israel. And all I did was make a video defending Rashida Tlaib, who said that Israel was an apartheid state. And it's not very hard to make the case because literally all you have to do is like quote international law, the UN, a bunch of Israeli leaders, former prime ministers, and South African anti-apartheid luminaries and activists. So I did that. I did a monologue based on that. They shot it, they recorded it, and then I got a call that the higher-ups didn't want to run it. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And in fact, I did get a little hint because after I recorded it, Robbie Soave came in, they like called him in to say like, oh, and by the way, AIPAC and Israel say like they had to provide, they don't usually do that, provide like a counter to someone's monologue. But I guess they were trying to cover their bases. And then that wasn't base covering enough, cover their asses really. And that wasn't ass covering enough, so they just pulled it. And then I pushed back. I mean, I wasn't even that aggressive about it. I was like, maybe what if you run it, but then you show something afterwards? Because I thought it was important enough to get it out there, and I wasn't being like that precious or like strident or principled about it, because I just thought it had a lot of good information. So even if they had to have some, schmuck come on afterwards to make a counter argument, it was fine, like let them try. And then they were like, oh, well, we don't always take pitches. We pass on pitches all the time. But like, this isn't a pitch process. You literally write a monologue, they put it into the teleprompter, errors and all, and then you read it and they release it. Like, that's the process there. So I was like, okay. And then I got an email telling me I no longer had to come back. I was no longer needed, which was nice of them. And they wished me best. That was so nice. I felt really seen by that. But, well, and what was funny is that like, so I was a regular unpaid weekly guest for like 2 years. And then I was an occasional guest anchor, and I was going to become a regular anchor, and that is paid. But I thought it was interesting that they couldn't even tolerate me as an unpaid like person there. Like, we will not accept your free labor anymore. That's how toxic it was to say that it was an apartheid state. And of course, Brianna Joy Gray was in this awkward position because she was there, and she very bravely defended me and basically called them liars. She did a monologue because she was a regular host there. And I know she was conflicted, and she said she was conflicted. I'm not like violating her trust. She said this publicly. She was conflicted about staying. And she said, The Hill is saying that this was a stylistic choice. Like, no one believed that for a second. I think like my biggest haters were like, come on, you can do better, Hill. And then she said she would talk about Israel. And of course, what happens is that she wound up getting fired a couple of years later. But the cool thing is that I do want to thank Democracy Now! Because when they reported on Brianna Joy Gray's firing, they said this comes 2 years after Katie Halper was fired. And they showed my Twitter picture, and my Twitter picture has me, now it has me and my new dog Bucky, but at that point it had me and my parents' dog Bodie. So Amy Goodman like cuts to a photo of me carrying my parents' adorable dog. So thanks to The Hill, indirectly, they made Bodhi a star. And I just have to give a shout out to Lizette and Turan who are here, and they are dog sitting Bucky, and they know about Bucky because I talk about Bucky on my show. I just have to bring in, for all the dog lovers, it's great, this is a Greater Israel / Greater Dog panel. But again, it's such a low price though compared to people who lose their livelihood. The price I paid was so low, and it's also, it's doesn't even deserve to be in the same sentence as what happens to journalists in Gaza or in Palestine, ranging from, Anas al-Sharif to Shireen Abu Akleh. And of course, it's useful to bring those examples up as proof that Israel is not, shocker of all shocks, the only democracy in the Middle East. They do not have the most moral army in the world. And what's fascinating is, what's that woman's name? Biana Goldrina or something? She's on CNN.
Yeah,
Biana, yeah. She's like, talks about the rape hoax all the time. Somehow.
She just dropped a new children's book. Have you seen that?
No.
Oh, this is wild. Okay.
We should have it here on
First of all,
stage.
she's married to Peter Orszag, who is like the guy who wrecked the economy under Obama,
Oh, nice.
or one of them. And she is a CNN anchor who just released a book called, it's something about like teaching children to be brave to stand up to anti-Semitism. And it's blurbed by the president of Israel, Isaac
Oh my
Herzog,
God.
who has said that there are no civilians in Gaza.
Exactly.
There's no distinction. It's being promoted by Jonathan Greenblatt, Israel's chief censor in the United
Disgusting.
States. And guess who else blurbed it?
Tony Blinken.
No, but close. Jake Tapper.
Of course. Did
But,
Dan Bash also?
can you imagine like a Muslim in the media, like,
Oh my God.
just doing anything like that and not losing their job?
Yes, right, exactly, totally, yeah. Yeah, right, how to teach your kids to stand up to Islamophobia or anti-Palestinian racism, they'd be fired in a second. But she
Blurbed
had,
by someone who called for like the killing of Jews. Like that's what Isaac.
right, yeah. Right, that is a better
And by the way,
this
is what they're kind of doing now as children are being slaughtered in droves and starved to death. This is what they're doing, is whining about the most privileged people some of the most privileged people who've ever existed in history, Jewish Americans, and what they have to endure in their private schools. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're so delusional. It's so discrediting. And they need to be like just called out to their faces for being such entitled, delusional, genocidal fuckfaces.
You're being too kind, Max. No, but, so, Biana was a big mass rape hoax cheerleader, so always talked about the rape being used as a weapon by Hamas. And what's so fascinating about these people is, it would be one thing if they talked about that, but then also talked about the documented on video rapes of Palestinian hostages, but they don't. So it's not even like they fell for a hoax and they at least care about sexual violence, even when it happens to Palestinians. They are not falling for a hoax, they're perpetuating a lie knowingly, and then they're choosing to ignore documented rapes that the Israeli media covers. I mean-
On video.
Yes, documented rapes on video. That is this one in particular was a gang rape that led to the hospitalization of someone. And this was not like, you did not have to do a deep dive into Israeli media to cover this. This wasn't just in Haaretz. This was in mainstream Israeli media. It was big enough news that a member of the Knesset said it was asked rhetorically if it was legitimate to insert sticks into people's rectums, and his answer was yes. And then a rabbi responded to this by blessing one of the rapists, and we all know that there were these right to rape protests. And then just imagine for a second, if there were video footage of the equivalent of this done to an Israeli hostage by people from Hamas, and then you had an imam sanctioning it, and then you had sanctioning as a thumbs up, not so awkward that sanction can mean opposite things. Anyway, you had a imam giving it a thumbs up. I know that's not actually what happens in Islam or any religion, but whatever the equivalent is of blessing it. And then you had a member of Hamas saying it's legitimate to insert sticks into people's rectums. Like, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash would be talking about it nonstop. They would do I don't even know, they would shut down, like all media would have like a moment of silence or something. The Empire State Building would be white.
Jake
and-
Tapper would like embed with an F-35 pilot to bomb a refugee camp.
Yeah,
Like,
basically, yeah. Yeah.
that would happen.
Yeah.
And sorry, just
Yeah.
a quick detail. I mean, this happened in the State Teman torture center on camera, and Israel's right-wing grassroots, basically the supporters of the Likud-led government, staged riots across the country in support of the soldiers who perpetrated the actual mass rape that documented on video, broke into an army base, like staged an insurrection. No one was arrested or punished for that, and the soldiers were let go, and then they were made into national heroes, including the one, Meir Shetrit. Look up Meir Shetrit. He's like a national hero in Israel because he violated the Palestinian prisoner's rectum. This is a society.
And he's like a TV star, right? He like made the rounds on TV, like late night TV shows.
Yeah. This is a society, according to a collection of rape crisis centers, where 75% of rapes of Jewish Israeli women go unpunished or unprosecuted. It's a society that is a haven for
Right.
pedophiles, including Tom Alexandrovich, the cyber spy who was just, escaped from Las Vegas, absconded out of Las Vegas under the
happens in
watch of an
Vegas?
Israeli U.S. attorney. I mean, it's become a farce. We were the first out of the gate to challenge the mass rape hoax, but now it's like we're getting so much mass rape reality shoved in our face and no one's doing anything about it. It's coming out of the state of Israel and its supporters.
And you guys were smeared as rape apologists and atrocity deniers, and no one
In Haaretz,
Yeah, has
the voice
anyone,
of the
like,
enlightened public.
has anyone said, sorry, we were wrong, you guys were right?
I don't get too many apologies. Jeremy, you wanted to say something?
Now, just all of these things, like all of those things are reported on the front page of Israeli media. They're on television, widely reported. But why don't we get any of the reporting here? Like, because we would oppose it. And when things are opposed, they're not put into action, or they're, it's no longer publicly supported in terms of policy. So like, it's censored here because if it wasn't censored, you'd have more people coming against Israel. So, and like, we're the piggy bank. So like, we need to keep the public here supportive of Israel, or else all falls down. But the fact that it's all over the media here and not here, that's a big giveaway of what's happening.
Also, because they are so on board there with dehumanizing Palestinians that they don't have to do any like cleaning up of reality, right? Because they're like, okay, yeah, they raped them, okay.
Yeah, they're celebrating it.
Yeah, yeah.
They're talking about it like they believe they have the moral high ground. They're so sure of themselves that they're gloating about it, and it's something that we would find in America, in our culture, in our society, just reprehensible. So it needs to be kept far away from our television screens.
And I would just say the first time I saw that video was making the rounds, I saw it on X, which is formerly Twitter, which goes back to Benjamin Netanyahu now saying that they need to find a way to change the algorithm on social media because they don't want those types of things getting out. That video was viral, and I don't remember seeing one corporate media outlet cover that story.
And the Times covered it like many, many, many paragraphs down in the article. Like you would have had to have read the whole thing. It wasn't in the headline the way it would have been, obviously, if there was a non-rape, a fake rape, which they managed, what is it? Screamed without words.
It's always in the passive voice. It's like, electric rod finds way into Palestinian rectum. Got lost on a birthright trip and found its way there.
Yeah, it's really interesting when we think about the ways that they've tried to silence people for Israel. When we think about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, this is another thing that I've noticed where there have been attempts, not just by corporate media, but also by Congress, to pass legislation to conflate the two. And I think it's important for the panel to explain to everybody the difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism so that these words are not merged together. I also want to add that I think it is very important that we do acknowledge there are people who are pushing back on Benjamin Netanyahu and they say it's just the government. And I don't think it's just the government. I continue to say it's the society. And I worry when I do see politicians that are saying this now today, that it's just Benjamin Netanyahu. If we remove him, everything will change. I don't believe that. I think it's embedded in the culture in Israel, and I think that you have to get to the root of that cause. But if the panel could discuss a little bit about the difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, we'll go to Max.
Yeah, I think we've been very successful in the independent media in forcing the conversation on genocide, on this being an actual genocide, what Israel is doing in Gaza, and generating a lot of momentum that then translated into the human rights in NGO industrial complex that has been mostly interested in official, genocides by official enemies, in which, like, mysteriously very few to no people die, actually acknowledging this is a genocide. And then it moves into mainstream media with the New York Times finally acknowledging genocide, at least on its op-ed pages. And we've been very good at, since we understand the reality on the ground, at forcing the more mainstream institutional forces to adopt language that is proportionate to the crime. And I think what we need to do next is force a very public discussion on Zionism, on what Zionism is and why it is the heart of the problem. Peter Beinart had some book called The Crisis of Zionism. The crisis is Zionism. And Peter Beinart, a few years later, recognized that, under a lot of pressure from our side. So what is Zionism? I mean, Zionism is falsely...
It's Jewish self-determination.
Right. It's just... The Muslims have like 32 states. Why can't we have a state of our own? It's just right. We'll just get a state. Everybody gets a state. Hey, there's a Zoroastrian state. Everybody just gets a country, and it can be built on top of other people, and they can be forcibly displaced and genocided so that we can have it because, I don't know, we suffered something in the past. Zionism is it is the messianic secular movement that has essentially more or less replaced Judaism in the West, leading to anti-Semitism, which believes that I and Katie and, I don't know, is your mother Jewish?
Pizza bagel. Yeah.
And your mother's Jewish. We have more right anywhere between the Mediterranean Sea and the River Jordan than a Palestinian who has had family living there since the time of the disciples, or a Samaritan in Nablus, for example. And that's all it is. That's all it is. And it's justified by people who don't believe in God, but believe God gave them the land. And if you challenge that, they'll bring up...
That's what they mean when they're like, it's complicated, it's complex.
If you challenge that, they'll bring up the Holocaust. That's it. There's no legal justification for it in international law. There has never been a UN resolution that supported the reality of a Jewish state. They point to Resolution 181, which the UN, which was fundamentally a corrupt institution at that point, in which they supposedly established a state of Israel, but the state of Israel was not established as a Jewish state under Resolution 181. A Jewish state must maintain a majority of Jews within its borders. First of all, Israel has no internationally recognized borders. But at that point in 1948, Resolution 181 set aside territory for Israel that would not have had a majority of Jews. There still would have been about 50% Palestinian, 48, 50%. So if they wanted to be a democracy, one person, one vote, they might have elected a Palestinian prime minister, which is why by May of 1948, the Zionist militias, the Haganah and the Stern Gang and the rest of them, Lehi, had already ethnically cleansed 200 Palestinian villages before Israel declared its so-called independence. Why? Because they had to invalidate Resolution 181 to make sure that they controlled, that within the territory they controlled, they had a majority of Jews. And that meant ethnic cleansing, and they created Gaza as it is today, as the cradle of resistance, by pushing the refugees from Jaffa through the Negev all the way down. I mean, some of them took boats to Lebanon. They were literally thrown into the sea, and they were forced into Gaza for about 2 years. Many Palestinians were forced into, from Der Askelon in the south, into a concentration camp surrounded by barbed wire, and then they were taken in trucks to Gaza. So that's what Gaza is. That's what Zionism is. That's why Zionism is the heart of the problem. And now let's just flash forward to current reality, political reality, stuff that, like, you know, pundits, Thomas Friedman readers can understand.
You have some animal analogies?
And they have no answer for this. Jewish liberals who read Thomas Friedman have no answer for this. Look at the polls in Israel, not just the polls of the majority of Israelis, including those who say they're center-left, who support the genocide in Gaza, but who are the most popular politicians in Israel? Beyond Benjamin Netanyahu, all the way down into the single digits, it's genocidal maniacs who lust for the blood of Palestinians. Avigdor Lieberman is one of the top opponents to Benjamin Netanyahu. He's polling close to 20%. He's called for beheading Palestinian legislators in the Knesset with axes. He has passed legislation calling for loyalty oaths to the state of Israel. He believes Netanyahu hasn't been genocidal enough in Gaza. Then there's Naftali Bennett, who also comes out of Likud, who represents the settlers, who said, I've killed many Arabs in my life, and that is not a bad thing. Then you have Benny Gantz, the former chief of staff of the Israeli military, who oversaw the slaughter in Gaza in 2014, which I personally witnessed. It was a pilot program for this. He campaigned as part of the blue and white opposition party that the Thomas Friedman liberals loved, with an ad showing the ruins of Shujaiya east of Gaza City and declaring Gantz is hard, like Gantz is tough. And he killed 2,300 terrorists. Most of the people were civilians. That was his campaign ad, okay? That's everyone beyond Netanyahu is genocidal. There is no alternative to genocidal Zionism in Israel today. And what we're gonna see if there's a pause or some kind of letting off of steam and the Israeli army stops what is about, I mean, if somehow the final solution that it's planning to destroy Gaza City and all the populated areas, I mean, I can get into the details of that. It will be the whole crime of the century. If that is halted somehow, they are going to go through a massive political upheaval, and the more messianic right-wing forces will win. And there's just gonna, I mean, it's the reality in Israel that's causing the bottom to fall out in support of Israel in the U.S., and creating this massive crisis within Jewish communal life where they just refuse to come up with the answers that we already had at a young age, because once they do so, you know, secular, liberal, older boomer Jews who still believe kind of in Israel, they lose their identity. It just starts falling away in their hands. Then they're just like white people in America who's like have some Yiddish words that they know. And
Abyssal.
And so what will they do? We have to force that. We have to force that debate. We have to force that contradiction out, and we have to force a public discussion in mainstream institutions on Zionism being a racist crime against humanity.
Also, I wanted to, can I ask Jeremy something? So I have a lot to say, but I actually really think that a really important thing for you to talk about that relates to the question of this being just a Netanyahu issue is what you heard and saw on the ground from people who were not Netanyahu and were, well, you can tell them what they were doing vis-a-vis aid, because I think this is really incredible to share.
Sure. So, first, 1 second, lots of people in Israel, like what Max was saying, they don't think Netanyahu is hardline enough. They attack him from the right. They think that he bends a knee to the international community too often. That's how a lot of people in Israel view him. And even people who in New York City, you meet people, they're in art school, they have piercings, they paint, they want affordable housing, they want free health care. You have that same type of person in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem, but when it comes to the Palestinian question, they're entirely on board with Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and Smotrich, especially after October 7th. But when I was in Israel last year, I was at the Karim Shalom and Nitzana border crossings, and they were settlers, they were civilians in Israel, they were reservists, and they were blocking humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza. And this was before not allowing aid in was policy in Israel. So
Trailblazers of genocide.
yeah, they needed like a proxy to stop aid from going in, and that's when they allowed these Israelis to block the aid, and then kind of the government could doesn't have any responsibility. And I was speaking to them, and they're blocking rice flour as if it's a truck full of RPGs. And I'm talking to them. They're casually saying, and just like how they're celebrating, raping prisoners, how they are defending raping prisoners, and this is all over the media, and they do it proudly. The same thing, like I put a camera in their face and I'm talking to them, and they have this moral high ground of, no, we don't want them to eat. No, we think they should. We think they could starve to death and pay for what they did to us on October 7th.
And they bring their kids with them.
And they bring their kids, and
Beautiful.
they bring popcorn machines. They bring balls, soccer
Moon
balls.
bounce. Didn't they have a moon bounce?
Yeah, they had a bouncy castle, and they essentially have a little fair and a barbecue on the other side of the Gaza wall. And because of their presence there, the Israeli military said this is now we have to close the aid crossing because this is having all these civilians here is a security risk. So they allow the civilians to come there, and then they use their presence as justification to not allow aid in. But like I would speak to a reservist, and he would proudly look at my camera and say, "Yeah, I was in Gaza last month. I was in charge of explosions. We blew up a UN office. I was in charge of helping families." And he didn't put the propaganda spin on it where you hear Zionist America say the UN office was it was UNRWA, there was terrorists there, blah blah blah. He said no, it was in charge of helping families. He told me what it was for, and he still thought it was justified. And so looking at these people, and also Max can talk about this because he's spoken about it before, and it like kind of I noticed it. These are the happiest people in Israeli society. And once you understand that, like it's not like a liberal Zionist where like, we could let a little food in. I don't know. I don't like the war, but this and that. It's like, no, they are ecstatic. They have no qualms about what they're doing. They're fanatical. It's a strange, deranged attitude they all have. And I was with them for a while, but if Max can actually talk about that for a second, because they are the happiest people in Israeli society, and you would never think so.
Max?
No, can you?
Yes.
Happy fundamentalist.
The happiest people in Israeli society?
The settlers.
The settlers.
Yeah. I mean, they're dancing in the streets. They're dancing in their settlements. They get free reign right now. They're deputized. But thanks to the American taxpayer, they've been given M4 carbines and uniforms, Israeli army uniforms. They can carry out price tag violence in the name of the state now, not just as settlers. The leash is off. Trump supports West Bank annexation. And it's horrible. It's terrible for the Palestinians. But this is also forcing the discussion. They're not going to claim that Israel seeks peace, that Israel ultimately seeks a Palestinian partner on the other side, but they just walk away from the deal of the century. All that liberal Zionist propaganda is gone, and there's nothing there but rabid, genocidal settlers. And once they annex the West Bank, and what are they doing now? They're talking about the reoccupation of Gaza. I mean, they're essentially taking control of the municipal functions of Gaza, providing food for people through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, but they're afraid to do it themselves, so they created a fake American front, which was initially supported by Mossad, and now they're getting some suspicious European entities to support it. lot of money is coming through Bulgaria, apparently. Israel's sort of afraid to take full responsibility for what it's actually planning to do, which is to take over Gaza and take over the West Bank. Why? Because once it fully takes over and annexes, it has to provide for that population, and there's no question about apartheid anymore. They're officially controlling millions of people, and every census since the mid-2000s has shown that a majority of people between the river and the sea are Palestinian, non-Jews. So it's just clearly apartheid right now. And then beyond that, you look at the breakdown inside Israeli society. There was a huge protest. 300,000 people protested in Israel for a ceasefire. They didn't protest, some of them maybe, but most of them protested because there are still Jewish lives at stake in Gaza. There are about 10 or 20 living Jewish captives there. That's who they care about. And they know that reoccupation of Gaza, destroying Gaza City, means their death. They will die. Orit Strzok, who's a member of the Netanyahu's coalition, a settler, very fascistic settler, has said, we need to stop caring about the hostages and move on to total victory. Like, they're openly saying it now. So this protest takes place. That's a huge protest. We don't see any protests like that in the US. I mean, if you consider that there are about 6 or 7 million Jewish Israelis and that proportion of their population protested, it's huge. But that's pretty much all that's left of that part of the society that represents sort of the legacy of labor Zionism. They are defeated. And the future is right-wing messianism. I don't even know if I could call it right-wing. It's messianic, fascist.
Centrism, Israeli centrism.
It's the fascist center. And so naturally they are the happiest people. They're actually much happier than like MAGA or Trumpers, because there's no DEI going on college campuses or like some ad campaign. There's not going to be like something they can get mad about, like a trans person in a Bud Light commercial. It would be like a Palestinian in a, I don't know, Taipei commercial. I don't know what they would have, but there's no cultural phenomenon for them to get upset about
like
in Israel. They have hegemony over the culture there as well, unlike MAGA in this country.
And the idea of, it's a great idea, it's a nice idea that Netanyahu doesn't represent the people, and to the extent that he doesn't represent them, it's because they're to the right of him. That's an idea that I think exists. Israel is a lot, so Chaim Bershit-Zabner, the anti-Zionist Holocaust son of survivors who I talked about earlier, he says that this is the most democratic genocide in history, because unlike in Germany, it's like unanimous support. You won't get killed if you oppose it the way you would in Nazi Germany. And yet those people who are opposing the genocide, I'm not talking about people who want a ceasefire because they want to save the lives of Jewish hostages, but people who actually are opposing what's being done to Gaza is a teeny minority. So we have to get over this idea that it's just Netanyahu. Liberal Zionists say this all the time. It's like, it's not the Israelis. Israelis hate Netanyahu. It's like, to the extent that they hate him, they don't hate him because they like Palestinians. There are all these polls that I have on here that I won't spend too much time, but it's a teeny minority that opposes the amount of force that Netanyahu is using. 82% of Israelis support ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza. 56% support expelling Palestinians with Israeli citizenship, the so-called Israeli Arabs from Israel. 47%, I guess this is low, agreed to the statement, when conquering an enemy city, the Israeli Defense Force should act as the Israelites did in Jericho under Joshua's command, killing all its inhabitants. So this is the population of Israel. 58% of Jews in Israel aren't concerned about violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. And I do think it's really important to point out that, again, I don't think, we're not motivated by the idea of Jewish safety, but I think it's important, if you're watching this and you're into that, I doubt you're watching this, but whatever. If you are, here's the deal. And I think people are realizing this more and more. Israel does not make Jews safe. Israel, and this is not why I speak out about Israel. It's not because I'm concerned with Jewish safety. I speak out against it because it's committing crimes against humanity. It's doing it in allegedly our name. But the irony is, for all these people who are so pro-Israel because they think it keeps Jews safe, Israel is undoubtedly putting Jews in danger. They are, I mean, look, October 7th happened in Israel, didn't happen anywhere else. You don't make Jews safe when you live stream a genocide and say it's in the name of Jews. And also, I mean, it's not just like, you know, there's the banality of evil concept. This is like the celebration of evil. There's no hiding it. There's no like making it antiseptic.
No, it's not very banal. It's kind of cartoonish.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like to the point where if you like draw an Israeli minister in Germany, you go to jail for a hate crime.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And, or like wearing the
No one got that joke.
Yeah, I got it. But he got it too, yeah. Anti-Semite. No, just kidding. But, you know, wearing the lingerie of the women that they're ethnically cleansing and who knows what else they're doing. I mean, it's sick. So people are finally getting to see that Israel is not making Jews safer. So then the next thing is like you were saying, Max, that some Jews without Israel, they just feel like boring white people. But you can be a Jew, and not only can you be, like, not to sound corny, but my Jewish identity, oh my God, cue some music, I don't know, Fiddler on the Roof. My Jewish identity is very much grounded in being an anti-Zionist. Like there is that whole Jewish tradition that got wiped out for various reasons, but there is a way, you don't have to you don't have to stop being Jewish because you're anti-Zionist. I would argue like that is the way to be Jewish. And there's all these historical precedents for that. But, you know, again, if you care about Jews, you really got to let go of Israel, like cut the cord, because it's not just Netanyahu, as we were just pointing out. This is not like a fringe there. This entire nation, with the exception of a very small minority, is either excited about or tolerant of genocide. That's not like all you liberal Zionists out there. You can't pretend that this is kosher. So you need to let go of it. Do something else, I don't know, like go learn Yiddish if you want to do something like Jewish, and that's cool also because Israel helped kill that, so that's an act of resistance, because that's another way that Israel helped Hitler, was like by wiping out Yiddish. But, you know, there is a tradition of anti-Zionist Jewishness, and I invite everyone to join. And even if you've been terrible before, I know a lot of people are like, accountability, yes, but we can have like re-education camps for people.
Really, can I say something really quickly? I would go a step further. Israel puts Jews in peril. Zionism puts Jews in peril by design.
Yeah,
it
right.
wants anti-Semitism. It needs anti-Semitism to proliferate in order to justify its own existence as a supposed Jewish sanctuary. There's nothing that Netanyahu and his minions would like more than if some Nazi with a very murky social media background walked into a synagogue on a Friday night and shot some people. That's what they want. I'm sorry. They would, and they would pretend to be upset about it or indignant, but, you know, the donations would come rolling in and it would justify Israel as, I mean, it's why Netanyahu, after the Charlie Hebdo and attacks on the kosher supermarket, went to a synagogue in France and said, you all need to move to Israel now. And they said, no.
Whoops.
We're French. It's kind of cool here.
No
one actually wants to move there. I mean, are you insane? Israel's just announced, it's not a formal announcement, but it filtered out in Israeli media. The Israeli army's facing a manpower problem. The reservists are exhausted, and they need to recruit 600 to 700 soldiers from the Jewish communities of the United States. How are they going to do that and get you to become a genocide zombie unless they feel that there's this anti-Semitism lurking around every corner and that they need to go fight somehow to defend this Jewish sanctuary? There's no other way.
Yeah. And can I just add one more thing about the anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism thing? Like, it is also ironic that the very conflation, and this connects to what Max is saying about how you know, Zionists need anti-Semitism, but, you know, like, conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism is the flip side of conflating being Jewish with being Zionist. And, you know, there's a reason, like, that the KKK and David Duke types and Nazis, they like to use Jewish and Zionist interchangeably. And everyone knows that that's an anti-Semitic trope, right? It's a dual loyalty trope. We're all a monolith, and we all are loyal to Israel. We can't be trusted because we're loyal to another nation. But, like, it's not just the KKK and Nazis and neo-Nazis saying this. Like, that talking point is also shared by Israel and the ADL and AIPAC, which may be a sign that your ideas are fucked up when, like, you and David Duke could trade slogans.
The entire Jewish communal leadership advances that trope every day, which is why there are more and more recruits to kind of anti-Jewish
Yeah.
organizations, and it does
Right.
increasingly feel sometimes like we're living in a Groyper meme.
Yeah.
It's and people who don't know Jews or Jews like us, they didn't go to bar mitzvahs when you were growing up, and they didn't live in maybe a college town or a big city, and they're just looking at this situation
Right.
for the first time, and they're like, how would you not sort of wonder what the hell is wrong with Jewish people when our entire communal leadership is supportive of this genocide? I mean, the big liberal synagogue in D.C., where my brother went to Hebrew school, called Adas Israel, it's right there on Connecticut Ave, they hosted Yoav Gallant in the middle of the genocide for a meeting, and actually some of the parishioners, the congregants, got upset about this and said this guy's kind of a war criminal, and so they just had a private meeting with
Oh,
him.
that's nice.
But if you're from the outside, the goyim, you're looking at this, I mean, I have a hard time just like condemning them for starting to get some very bigoted ideas when we are totally denied any place at the table. There's no anti-Zionist Jewish organization with any power, any voice in this country at all that can speak, and we're totally denied a place in the mainstream or corporate media, and we're seen as by Israel's Interior Ministry down to the ADL, whose chief censor denounced me by name,
Mazel tov.
as almost worse than terrorists. So that fuels further anti-Semitism and recruits more people to anti-Jewish organizations, which form the other side of the coin
Right.
to Zionism. They help reinforce Zionism.
It's a feedback loop. Yeah. And Jews like us get called self-loathing or anti-Semitic. And the irony is every single time a Jew speaks out in defense of Israel, they're perpetuating anti-Semitism. They're the ones doing it. Because everyone sees what Israel's doing. So any evidence that Jews all support Israel is actually harming. And again, that's not the primary motive in speaking out, but I do think it's ironic that the biggest threats to Jewish safety are Israel and Israel's defenders. So
I think it's important to note, too, there are some of us that I would say, I can't believe it's been 2 years, but 2 years ago, that started to explain to people what Israel was trying to do, that they were committing a genocide. Some of us lost friends. And I know, Katie, you mentioned about being blocked on...
Talk about that. All right, it sounds like you went through something.
I did. One of my close friends that I've been friends with for over 10 years, after I said Israel was committing a genocide, decided, yeah, I'm not going to be friends with you anymore. Just like that.
Jewish person?
No.
Oh, thank God. That makes me feel so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there was a lot of, I have not heard from them since, don't want to dwell on that. But what I'm saying is those of us that came out earlier on, we did take hits, whether it's, people losing their jobs, whether it's, losing friends, losing family members, et cetera. And I look now and I see that the United Nations is now declaring that there is a famine in Gaza, which is what I think many of us tried to warn people was coming. And so I think we have to get to this point where we talk a little bit about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, Katie, and also the videos that some of us have seen where Palestinians were going to seek aid and they were killed by IDF soldiers. There are articles where IDF soldiers have come forward and said that they were told to kill the Palestinians as they come to get aid. And I feel like more people should be covering this. This should be all over corporate media, but it's not getting that type of coverage. And now we have famine in Gaza. Katie?
Yeah, and also I just want to give you a shout out because it's also harder when you're not Jewish. It's one thing to be called a self-loathing Jew or an anti-Semite, but it's even, I think, harder when you're not Jewish to be called that. So,
Well, the Israel lobby has historically destroyed any black public figure who spoke out on this because of the threat they pose. Because once you mobilize the black political establishment, which is just has their own experience with oppression, it's gonna lead to serious problems for the Israel lobby and within the Democratic Party as well. That's why they buy figures like Wesley Bell and Cory Booker and so on, and displace people like Cori Bush. What did they spend, $12 million on her? So.
Yeah, I mean, so Max and I have both interviewed Anthony Aguilar. I don't know, have you had him on? And have you had Anthony
Not
Aguilar?
yet.
Okay, we'll connect you.
We'll
You'll like,
work on that.
Yeah, we'll do that. And he, of course, is the Green Beret who was one of the whistleblowers. I think the only whistleblower so far to come forward within, like, not anonymously. And he witnessed the killing of people at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Aaron Mate calls it, I think, the Gaza Holocaust Foundation, which is probably one of the most, and this says a lot, but it's probably one of the most disgusting things that we've seen so far, because they've basically replaced actual food aid. They got rid of UNRWA, and they have reduced the number of food distribution sites from 400 to 4. They give people like 15 minutes warning that they're going to open them up. But it's worse than that. It's not just like a fake aid and non-aid, and it doesn't actually make people, give people what they need. They are like killing fields. This is why if you follow this stuff, everyone thinks you sound like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist, but it's just true. And luckily, these are evangelicals who are involved, so that's great. So we're covered with the anti-Semitic part. But, Anthony Aguilar talks about this and how he witnessed like this adorable boy named Amir, who was a little kid who came to get food, and he didn't have a bag or anything. He was just like collecting his food in his hands, and he thanked Anthony, and he gave him a kiss, and he said thank you to him in English. And then the IDF like opened fire into a crowd and killed people, including this little boy Amir. When he came forward with the story, the Israeli government and he wasn't with Global. He was hired by Global. It wasn't. He worked with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, but he was hired by Global Solutions or something.
UG Solutions or
Yeah.
Safe Reach Solutions.
UG, yeah. And so they said that, oh no, he was lying, and Amir is totally safe, and they released a photo of Amir, except the kid looks nothing like Amir. And then they actually found Amir's family, and they're like, no, we don't know where he is. He's still missing because he was killed. I think that this has forced the starvation that we're seeing, and oh my gosh, the attempts to, it's almost like a mitzvah, almost what Bari Weiss is doing. Her attempts to defend what Israel is doing by saying, the Free Press is saying this, those kids who have died, they had cerebral palsy. Or my favorite one is they had rickets, right? Because rickets is a disease that you get from malnutrition, so that's great. Another excuse they have is that one of the kids who died had shrapnel in his head from the IDF. So again, you're really making Israel look great. This shows you how detached and immoral these people are, that they think that they're defending Israel by pointing out that these kids are dying because they're more vulnerable than other kids, which is literally how it works. Like, when you are more medically vulnerable, you die before other ones do. That doesn't mean it's okay to starve them to death. They're like making this weird eugenicist argument, or they're arguing that like you deserve the death penalty if you have cerebral palsy and you're a Palestinian kid. It's so foul.
They're Untermenschen.
Yeah, they are. They are Untermenschen. And it's actually like, I am grateful to the people making this argument because they are revealing the true face of what Zionism is right now.
And who's manufacturing more anti-Semitism than someone like Bari Weiss, who's trying to justify the killing of every Palestinian child in Gaza?
Well, not every. Not every. Only the ones with pre-existing conditions. They're the ones who die first, which is okay, as long as there's a triage system and not everyone dies at the same time. Then I guess it's okay. These are such morally bankrupt, foul ghouls, and I think though that people are. Israel has not been able to portray this as a but Hamas, but October 7th response. The starvation thing, they just haven't been able to package it that way, which is why we're finally seeing people say, no, okay, this isn't cool. Because they just can't package it as a security issue.
I feel like U.S. politicians, they're willing to talk about the starvation a little more than they're willing to talk about the bombs and the killing fields, because they're not directly responsible for allowing aid in, but they are signing all the legislation that's sending the bombs. So they'll talk about, Netanyahu should open up the aid crossing. He should, allow food in, but they won't talk about the constant, unrelenting bombing, because the bombs were sent by them. So I feel like they feel a little less responsible for the food aid. And I'll say I was in Jordan a couple months ago, and I went to a couple of the UNRWA warehouses that have all of the food that was supposed to go to Gaza if there wasn't a complete siege, and they're building warehouses to hold more food. They have too much food to even hold, and there was so much propaganda that was manufactured to connect UNRWA to the people who carried out October 7th, and that was all intentional because now you have like food that's good, that's healthy. All these boxes are made by nutritional experts. They know what these people need, and they bring it to the spots that the people are. And when the ceasefire happened, like UNRWA, the first ceasefire, UNRWA sprung into action. They were bringing food into Gaza. Like people were eating, and the ceasefire in like most recently, they couldn't bring anything, and instead they had like an Israeli Mossad, U.S.-funded mercenary group say here's some food and then shoot people, and like it started with the propaganda for UNRWA.
Right, and it's also, I mean, one last thing. You understand why the IHRA put so much effort into saying that it's anti-Semitic to compare contemporary Israel policies with the Nazis? Because it's such a natural comparison to make. I'm sorry, it is. Like, that's why they had to make it a really anti-Semitic trope, because what are they doing? They are pretending that they're providing aid, which first made me think of like, here, Jews, why don't you take a shower? But actually, we're gonna kill you in gas chambers. Then Gabor Mate made the comparison that, like, during the Holocaust, they would lure people from the ghettos onto the trains with the promises of food. That's what we're seeing with these people doing now. It's hard, and a lot of people I've interviewed have said that historically they like never felt comfortable. And again, it's not apples and apples; it's not a one-to-one comparison. But they've historically felt uncomfortable making kind of any comparisons between Nazism and what Israel's doing, and that they're no longer able to not do that. I interviewed this guy Daniel Levy, who's like was an Israeli negotiator at Oslo, and he says it's so verboten, like it's so, you cannot ever do that, but it's like they're daring us to do it with their policies, with their starvation policies. And then the people like Barry Weiss et al. Who are whitewashing it are just like the people who are denying starvation in the Warsaw Ghetto or in the concentration camps.
We're being told we have 5 minutes, so let's do some questions. I can't refer to it as genocide. I can't say genocide here because I'm gonna implicate many of my friends in the Democratic Party who sent the bombs. I can't do it. I voted for the aid supplemental, so I'm not going to be able to say genocide, but you can say genocide.
That's your burning?
Let's take 2 questions at once.
That's not a good burning, come on.
There's a mic. Yeah, bring the mic.
Here, so if you just
Did you
go
see,
up,
he was good with Dana Bash.
question, just raise your hand.
can you like
Yeah.
call people?
Dana Bash was
Sure.
like, does
Because
the
I
Moss have any
feel so bad
culpability in this?
selecting
No.
them.
Okay. You
selected.
with the mic, come on down, and let's go to.
Maybe take 2 at once because we have so
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to you, and let's go to the woman in the back with the green and gray sweater.
Is this like a ringer? She came out of nowhere.
Oh, okay. Hi. Yeah. So first of all, thanks for everything that you guys do. I came in a little late, so maybe you guys already kind of talked about this or touched on it, and I feel maybe you were with the Barry Weiss comment. But I feel that I've been noticing a bit of a shift in the kind of Israeli Western media propaganda strategy or PR strategy lately. Like you have like Benjamin Netanyahu going on like English language speaking podcasts and talking about like his McDonald's order and stuff like that. And I feel like it kind of speaks to like a certain desperation that they're encountering just in terms of laundering their actions in the Western media. And I was wondering if you've noticed that yourselves over the last couple of years or recently.
Let's take one more with that, and let's get someone who is on time. Actually, no. Can we get it?
That's Caucasian.
The gentleman over there in the white collar shirt with his hand raised.
How you choose people.
Super personal question, but may have some resonance. So my dad died, 35 years ago, and my mom likes it when I go to the synagogue, to the cemetery with her. They have Jewish services there, And the rabbi, it's a pretty liberal, pretty progressive congregation. My family is definitely not pro-Israel, but he always gives a little prayer for the Israeli occupying forces. What should I do? My mom likes to have me there. I feel really uncomfortable hearing that crap. But on the other hand, speaking out against it, I don't know. What do you guys think in a situation like that?
Can I quickly? Yeah, I mean, that's the problem with going to shul. Like my cousin's bar mitzvah, they had like at a very liberal synagogue in the North Shore, they had an American flag and an Israeli flag by the bima. I'm like, and they call me up to like say something, you know, they did like a bima call. I'm like, how can I not burn this flag? It's right next to me.
Just asking
Like it's an
you, they're begging
abomination.
It's a shanda not to.
And they actually said a prayer for the soldiers of Israel. Like it's
Yeah, they should, because they're going to hell.
true. I mean, you know, and so it's very hard for me to find one that I can go to. I mean, and then also a lot of the liberal ones are cartoonishly woke. Like there's Temple Micah in DC that had a huge sign in front that said, abortion is a Jewish value. And I'm like, I'm pro-choice, but that's like, are you trying to make people hate us even more?
Tay-Sachs.
Yeah. Oh man, this is rich. But so, yeah, I mean, it's Jewish institutional life is just controlled by its under Zionist occupation, and many Jews feel left out. And like, there's been attempts to try to find like alternatives. I have trouble going to the like alternative Passovers because like it doesn't start for an hour until after everyone says their pronoun. And I'm like,
To be fair, it's not like Seders are ever that quick anyway, so don't blame it on the pronouns.
takes even longer. I mean, it's just hard to find a place to fit in there. But
you got to send your kids to kindergarten.
on the question of the woman in the back, I mean, Netanyahu, the reason he called for changing the algorithm and demanding all these changes in social media is the old formula that the Israel lobby had for suppressing the narrative or managing the narrative doesn't work anymore because corporations are not, corporate media is not where it's at anymore. It's in podcasts, it's grassroots, it's atomized, it's on social media, and so they've lost control of the narrative, and the popular people are podcasters. That's why the Foreign Ministry of Israel's invested $150 million into paying influencers. They're taking all these podcasters, like the degenerate Destiny Bonnell, to Israel. And
Mr. Borelli.
Yeah.
Mr. Benelli.
I mean, just they're just like trying to take over the podcast, and they're failing. And Netanyahu was denounced by his hosts on that podcast as well. They said like he was like, I guess it turns out we didn't know who he was, but it turns out he's like Hitler. Like that's not a good post like wrap up interview to have.
Honest.
So that's why that's happening. And just back to your question, you have to confront that, Rabbi. I mean, our role as Jewish anti-Zionists is to confront within Jewish life and also to get into Jewish institutions if we haven't been exposed already, and expose, and not just Jewish institutions like the ADL or the Israel lobby, but to use our privilege to expose them, or like what me and Jeremy did in Israel, going and using our privilege to get in there and do journalism exposing the blockage of aid convoys, or what I did back when I was producing my book, Goliath. So we have a special privilege and a special obligation, and we should use it. And it's a tough obligation, but I think now, like, look at what's happening. Like it's now or never.
All right, let's go ahead and grab two more questions really quickly.
Last questions.
Yes. Gentleman here in the red sweater in the front, and gentleman there in the gray T-shirt.
One question, sorry.
Oh, one.
We
Oh,
already had a
sorry.
question from the front.
Okay.
Right where the guy with the hand, right? Yeah, give him that mic. We got to get out of here. Sorry, man.
Sorry.
Tell me if my facts are correct and if I am grasping at straws or if this is a potential real reason for hope. I was wondering about the time and if there would be any opportunity really here. And I looked at the ANC and the IRA. The ANC was formed in 1912. It was legalized in 1990. That was 78 years later. The IRA was formed in 1921. The Good Friday Agreement in 1998 was 77 years later. The PLO as Fatah was originally not formed until 1954. I did not know that until I looked into it, that it had previously been the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, but the origination of the Palestinian independence movement was 1954. That was only 71 years later. It occurs to me that part of what happened as a personal experience through our apartheid is that there was a generational shift in U.S. domestic politics. I think that also applied to the Good Friday agreements. In both cases, domestic politics of Africans and of Irish, and similarly here now of Jews. Just like there were more Irish people in the United States than there were in Ireland, there are more Jewish people in the United States than anywhere else in the world. Do I have these facts correct?
But
and is it a reason for hope?
Except it would be the Palestinians for that parallel to work is the problem. Right?
Sure.
But
Well, sure. Maybe. Yeah. It's just, well, he's saying there's more Palestinians, but my point is the role of domestic politics, but also the time frame and the generational shift. As the ADL said, we have a TikTok problem. Go.
Well, the problem with the parallel too is that there is a generational shift. There's a popular shift now. But when you look at apartheid South Africa, or you look at the Good Friday Agreement, there wasn't the same institutional opposition because there was not really a South African apartheid lobby. It was just like the Republican Party and like some Southern Democrats, and then that folded pretty quickly. The final vote to sanction South Africa was Republican Senator Richard Lugar from Indiana. I mean, I think Bob Dole eventually voted for it. But these people are on the take from a bribery network called AIPAC. So nothing will happen. There will be no change until AIPAC is registered as a foreign agent, which it is, and the Espionage Act investigations begin.
but also on the other
We gotta just wrap. Sorry, we have to wrap. Our time will come. Yes.
Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.